are in listen-only mode.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to the latest of the APM's webinars. Delighted to see we've got 113 and counting joining us. We've already had one correspondence from somebody in New Delhi, so this audience is not limited to the UK. This particular webinar, and it will finish at 13:30 hours, dealing with building project leaders to deliver Her Majesty's Government's major projects portfolio. It is the latest in a series that we are running. A number of you will have joined us for Tim Banfield's presentation on the Major Projects Authority and what that has delivered for the government portfolio. This one is a natural successor which is dealing with how we have developed that talent inside government. Flowing on from this, the next one in this series will be an event on the 28th of April dealing with the Global Programme and Project Management Survey and the case for doing something different. And following that, on the 14th of May, we've got an event relating to programme and project management, two different animals, and that's being run concurrently with the Programme Management SIG Annual General Meeting. Details of those and all other events being run by the APM are on the website. If I turn then to this particular event, a few housekeeping issues. Clearly you've all joined us, delighted to have you on board. We're now up to 125, I see. If you have audio problems during the event, you will note from your connection details there is a dial-in number, and I know a number of people sometimes find reception is better to view the slides on the screen and to dial in and listen to the audio over the telephone. Dr. Paul will be delivering his presentation, which will run for about 35 to 40 minutes, which will leave about 20 minutes for questions. There will be no interruptions from you during the event. If you have questions, please use the question facility on the webinar to feed those questions in. When we get to the question time, I will then draw questions from the stack of those submitted to put to Paul for his Q&A session. Sadly, our experience is that, or perhaps I should say, I'm delighted to report that our experience of these webinars is we tend to get deluged with questions. So what I will try to do is pick the ones I feel are most relevant to the majority of the audience, and I will aggregate the questions together as they may be. Dr. Paul, as you will understand, is a tad busy, and what we can't do is commit to answering all the questions. The slides and indeed the whole webinar is being recorded and will be available on the community page shortly after the event finishes. You will all receive a questionnaire by email after the event. Please do contribute to the survey. That helps us ensure that the next of these will be even better than the one that we do here. Because we know a number of you will be gathered together in office environments, what we will not be doing is issuing individual CPD certificates, and it is recognized that you will self-certify your continuing professional development through this particular webinar. If I can then move very quickly on and introduce Dr. Paul Chapman. Paul, a man I know very well, he's a fellow board member of mine on the APM board, has a distinguished history in the academic world. Currently he's with the Side Business School in Oxford, and the two particular programs that he has responsibility for is the MSc in Programme and Project Management, very much a 2-year part-time program, drawing in leaders from across the world. This isn't just a UK audience. And then balancing that in the public sector, he leads the UK Government's Major Project Leadership Academy, which is the particular topic of this event. And I think those who joined us for Tim Banfield's webinar will appreciate just the degree of success that the MPLA is already achieving. So we have an authoritative presenter for us today, a personal friend, and having glimpsed through his slide pack, I hope you will find the next 40 minutes a fascinating session. With that, Paul, welcome aboard. Delighted to have you with us, and thank you very much indeed for your participation today.
Alan, thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words, and thank you for your good efforts in moderating us today. Greetings, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be able to do this seminar. The Major Project Leadership Academy is something that I've worked on for, I think it's about 3 years now that we've been delivering that particular piece of work. As Alan mentioned, I also am responsible for the university's MSc in Major Programme Management, which I'll mention briefly later on as well. But that programme's been running for about 7 years now. Before that, I've had a career in academia. What's been nice about that career is it's got me into industry quite significantly. And particularly at the start, I was involved in projects in the aerospace sector, looking at capital goods. So I'll reflect a little bit about that professional experience, but major on, I think, the thing that you're all interested in, which is the MPLA. Let me get my slides working and give you a bit of an agenda here. So I'll talk about the partners, the 3 bodies that came together to set up and deliver the Academy. Set that in context by talking about the challenge. You know, why is the MPLA an answer? What is it an answer to? To talk about the commitment from the various parties, not least government, and with a particular focus upon the participants who are enrolled upon the Academy. Then detail to some extent the Learning and Development Initiative. So what is the Academy? What does it look like? What does it involve? What does it entail? I'll try and walk the fine line between giving an overview on that and then diving into the minutiae. And I'm sure you'll excuse my enthusiasm for that when I talk about what some of that is. And then really get towards the end, talk about the impact, so perhaps touching on some of the things that Tim Banfield may have talked about in his work, and then some final reflections on what does this all mean. So if I start off on that agenda and talk about the partners, it really does have the feel of being 3 organisations that came together to deliver the programme. So our client, and it's worth thinking and keeping in mind that there's a contractual relationship here, but the client is the UK government. In particular, it's the Cabinet Office, and then within the Cabinet Office, the body that's responsible for major projects is the NPA, the Major Projects Authority. So Tim, when he spoke, he's the Director of Capability, so actually we report into Tim. I think in any good relationship, very, very rarely do we get the contract out. In fact, I can't remember us doing that. I think we're all aware of our obligations, but there's been as much support from them as a client in terms of the delivery as there has been from any of the other bodies. So that seems to go very well. There's ourselves at the Side Business School, so technically we're the prime contractor. Some words here that often bring a smile to the face. Oxford is a 800-year-old institution. If any of you have the chance to come here either as students or as tourists, you'll know that it's an iconic city of learning. It's a delightful place. Every September, some of the smartest kids in the country and internationally choose to make Oxford the place that they want to come and study. So it's got a great reputation. The business school is relatively young. It's about 15 years old. We have a delightful facility just opposite the train station. We also have a second facility on the edge of town called Egrove Park, and it's at Egrove that we deliver the programme. So it gives us a chance to deliver a residential course where the MPLA participants can come and spend periods of time stretching, also reflective. And we like to think that what we can bring is some of the world-class insights and some of the experience that we have, whilst also convening a group that brings in speakers from a range of organisations and also places outside the university to put together a programme. And we're supported in that delivery with Deloitte, the professional services firm, who have expertise in two particular areas that are relevant here. One is in capital projects and infrastructure, and the other is in their government practice. And we draw upon Deloitte and their capabilities quite extensively. So bringing that mix together, I think, has been a key in some of the impacts that we'll go on to talk about later. So the challenge, if we cast our minds back, probably, I think, relevantly about 4 years ago, the global financial crisis was still fresh in everybody's memory and looming large. The new coalition government had come in, had been elected to the UK, and I think the fiscal conditions were that there was no extra money. Things are still relatively tight now, but I think they were tighter still then, and austerity very much was the mantra for what the government was doing. At about that time, the Major Projects Authority was brought together, and I think that was the first occasion that the government really got to understand its obligations in terms of the series of projects that had been commissioned and were being delivered. And I think it came as something as a surprise to everyone, just when you added up the scale of that commitment. So about £500 billion. As this is an audience well versed in the dynamics of projects and programs, if you've got a £500 billion portfolio, the likelihood of it being delivered for £500 billion is, I'm sure you're all aware, no secret, actually quite unlikely. It will tend to be 500 billion plus something. 10% isn't unreasonable. There are portfolios that get delivered for significantly more than that. So essentially the government was sitting on an enormous liability. Could be 50 billion, could be 100 billion. And I'll sort of reflect on each of our experiences. I realise I'm now so old that I can remember when £1 billion was a lot of money. And it turns out it still is. So even at the sort of 10% error of 50 billion, the government had no cash. There was no place to go to cover that overrun. So the sense is that that portfolio needed to be brought under control. It was 2010, the National Audit Office did a review of the major projects within the Ministry of Defence and found that there was a £36 billion hole in the finances. So the amount of money the department had versus the level of commitments it had. MOD is one of the bigger departments for doing this sort of work, but it's certainly not the only one. So the sense that things had to be brought under control was absolutely paramount. So there was a need to, and as the headline there says, transform major project delivery in government. The sense is that certainly they needed to be delivered more on budget, but equally the political imperative as we race towards a general election now, the political team will have been well aware that to miss some of your commitments, don't worry, Minister, we'll be delivering that thing that was in your manifesto, but we'll be delivering it 6-12 months late, is not something that they want to hear. They will certainly be keen that some of their policy initiatives will be delivered on time, as well as budget, and as well as looking at the benefits that were intended at outset. So there was a real sense of something needed to happen and needed to happen now. If I put that in a slightly more global context, there are very few comparable sets of data from other governments. There's a ministry in India that brings together data on mega projects there. They report a similar level of performance, as in things tend to be late, over budget, don't quite achieve their benefits. Other than that, it's quite thin. What we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years is a significant number of governments being in touch with both us and the Cabinet Office to talk about just what they've done and the implications of doing it. Because I think all governments realise that bringing their portfolios under better management is absolutely key. And I think there's a very strong parallel with large corporates, where instead of being policy portfolio, it's a strategy portfolio of ideas that need to be delivered within the tenureship of management teams. So this ability to bring the data together in one place and look at performance over time seems to be critical. So amongst a range of answers, because the Major Projects Authority is busy in a number of areas, one of them is a sort of professionalisation of the people who lead these programs, the development of a profession in government more broadly, and the second bullet point there, embedding a human resource requirement is really one of the flavours. I think we could probably use the expression we can insure projects, which is we provide a contingency budget. How much is that going to cost? Oh, I think it's going to cost about £10 billion. Let's get contingency appropriate, maybe £2 or £3 billion on a large mega project. Would be a sort of insurance approach. There's an assurance approach, which is the monitoring of performance over time. And this second point is almost like an insurance approach. How do you ensure the success of a program? One of the answers is to upskill the people that are responsible for them. So what we needed to do was build technical and commercial know-how. So there are things that this cadre of people need to know. There is also the need to develop and also retain leadership and professional talent. So the Major Project Leadership Academy is focused both on a technical set of curriculum, but also it is about leadership development too. And then the impact is in one way transforming project delivery, and there's a sense of, well, how do we know we've done that? Well, one of the ways we will know we've done that is the ability to deliver projects on time, on budget, and deliver their intended outcomes. Part of the challenge is also, as you look across this portfolio, major projects are probably more diverse than would have first appeared. I've put a wide range of pictures there, and I don't intend to go through them all, but my suspicion is if we talk about major projects, people's minds tend to flow to the more physical. So often it's mega projects, so transport infrastructure is the sort of thing that comes rapidly to mind. What we find is in the government major project portfolio, about a third of projects are actually transformation projects. So classically the NHS project that happened 2 or 3 years ago, but throughout government there is a large number of transformation. Often that's IT-enabled transformation, but it can also be related to things like 10%, 20% headcount reduction and cost reduction that we've seen as part of the austerity programs, but also reorganising government more widely to take account of the way that society's moved. So there's transformation, there's mega events, so the Olympics is one of those that's happened in this time period. Probably a slightly more unusual approach is looking at enterprise, so how do we initiate business growth? So different from small startups, but more how does the economy benefit when we take small and medium-sized companies and support them to become large ones? There's a wider range of social programs. We'll then get into things like capital equipment. So capital equipment is particularly prevalent in the MOD budget. Ships, planes, land systems, etc. But we shouldn't also overlook things like big science. So a little picture in there about the Diamond Light Source facility here in Oxfordshire. Science is a big thing in the UK. as I wander into London, I tend to go via Paddington, and just around the corner is St Mary's. So I took a photo of the plaque there, which is about, I think it says something like, in the room above this plaque, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. For those of you who are in biotech will be very familiar that things don't happen like that anymore. The advances we get in biotech tend to be the results of very large teams, generally international, working in hundreds, if not thousands, to bring together, bring to market new cures. Likewise, we would see that in science and physics. So the CERN projects over in Switzerland, 2,000 physicists working together. It's not a case of the lone genius anymore. There's the mega projects, HS2, Crossrail, a whole bunch of others, and then energy. Energy is quite amazing in its scale. There's an Olympic amount of spend, so £10 billion every year for the next 20 years. So there's lots of fun and games that go on there. So when we're doing our learning and development challenge, we need to be able to deliver a program that will develop the capabilities of people who are responsible for delivering a diverse number and wide range of projects. What we found is very exciting is that in the differences are where some of the really interesting stuff lies. Excuse me. When we convene a class, and I'll talk a little bit more about the detail in a minute, it's been sort of deliberate that we will have a cohort of people from across the departments, because getting people from defence talking to people from Department for Energy and Climate Change, from Ministry of Justice, from the Home Office, looking at similar project and programme challenges in very different environments has been incredibly helpful to help people both step back from the immediacy of what they're facing, but also helps us to try and understand, well, what are the common issues that are at play here, and how are they manifesting in different situations. So it's both a challenge, but also a real resource for us in terms of our teaching. So the commitment, we've benefited enormously from sort of good old-fashioned senior management commitment. The Major Projects Authority has a handwritten mandate from the Prime Minister. The Major Project Leadership Academy has had the vocal and active support for the Minister of the Cabinet Office, Francis Maud, and in the Treasury it's been Danny Alexander, both of whom have come and visited the programme, both of whom are sort of public in their support. That also flows down to ministerial teams within departments, the Ministry of Justice and also the Department of Transport have both brought their Secretary of State and ministerial teams to come and work with their senior civil servants. And then from a more sort of permanent government point of view, to get the active support of the permanent secretaries, who are the people who head the various departments, has been encouraging. We get their support from when people are nominated onto the programme, so they need a letter of support from their permanent secretary. We will have permanent secretaries come and talk on the programme, come and get involved in some of the events. And also, when it comes to the end of the programme, each participant is interviewed in a Viva panel for an hour and a half. And the panel generally is chaired by me. We will have the head of the Major Projects Authority or their deputy, and we'll have a permanent secretary. So we get permanent secretary involvement and engagement from the start of the process right the way through to the end. So that's been superb. When we launched the programme, our Vice-Chancellor came along, so we've got superb support internally in the university. Our Dean. I've been in events that he's spoken at when he's not known that I'm there, and just sort of talks in the most glowing terms about the work of the Academy and the ability of Oxford to contribute at this level of scale. The second point here is that what we did find is that no one could have delivered this alone across our partnership, so it is a case of us working together ourselves, Deloitte and the Cabinet Office, to provide the rigour and depth of approach that we needed in order to deliver at scale. The commitment was to do a development programme for all major project leaders in the UK government, so 320 by the end of last year, to do it at pace, and then also to respond to the changing needs of government as we went along. So we've evolved the curriculum accordingly. So a little bit about what we did. I'll do a quick compare and contrast. Alan mentioned at the start, so I'm responsible for both of these programmes here at Oxford. So our MSc in Major Programme Management has cohorts of between 50 and 60 people a year. It's been going for 6 or 7 years. We've got our 6th cohort up and running. We're recruiting our 7th. And we tend to find most of the people on that programme are from the private sector, probably about 90%, and then 10% will come from public sector, but also those in the third sector. So we have people from the United Nations on there. About half of those folks come from overseas. Our biggest overseas group is North America, so US and Canada, but it's a very long tail of students who come from around the world. Their average age is about 40, so they're grown-ups doing big projects, I say generally in the private sector. And that was a nice compare and contrast. I got interviewed by Anne Macklin at The Economist, and one of her questions about the Academy was, well, isn't it a bit British and a bit public sector? And the MSc programme gives the nice compare and contrast, and the answer is, well, the Academy is British and public sector. However, we have the sort of perfect benchmark, which is that very international, very private sector, MSc in Major Programme Management. And we could swap people between each programme and nobody would be embarrassed. They're similar, but not the same. We've actually had 2 participants who've done both and were equally at home in each of the programmes. So the commitment, I will also point out to our Academy folk who do slightly balk at the amount of work that we ask them to do, which is about 30 days of work over about 12 months. Because I will remind them that our MSc students do about 4 times as much work over 2 years. So it's twice as intensive or twice as long. So let's just keep that in mind, folks. I think the thing that you are probably most interested in, though, is the MPLA. So the participants are exclusively UK government major project leaders. We have one example of an international participant, so we've had one civil servant from Ireland. Thus, clearly it is an international programme, not just UK. We've had 1 or 2 people from arm's length bodies, which seemed appropriate. So, for example, from the Highways Agency and the Environment Agency, principally because they're the bodies that deliver the programmes in Department of Transport and DEFRA, respectively. The commitment is, as it says there, part-time. Over 12 months, the participants do 3 residential modules over 5 days, so the 15 days there, and outside of those residential modules, they do about another 15 days worth of effort. So, what were we trying to do? We have a design. I'll show that on the next slide. When it comes to learning, we are deliberately and very consciously anchored in theory, which has its entertaining moments. We require participants to do some preparatory reading. We support them with reading groups, so tutorials before each of the programs. And I can remember enjoying my first sets of reading groups with the participants on the first module, where we were sort of going through some good, learned academic papers, and a lot of the comments were along the lines of, what the hell is this? Why are you making me read this? Is there any way we can get beyond the sort of flouncy academic language to the substance behind? And I do appreciate that that can be a barrier, but I think to a person, the Academy participants have sort of engaged with the process, have really been able to get into the theory, and the classic line, there's nothing so powerful as a good theory, to see its practical relevance, and then help us explain things. I mean, in summary, a good theory provides a general explanation for phenomena that you would see arising in different places. So, for example, what explains cost overrun? What explains cost overrun that's happened over decades and almost universally across different project types? So we can see it manifesting itself in different places, but what's the general explanation? And we try to really get in and understand that. And there's a benefit to government by doing that, which is also to make the major project leaders more transferable and transportable across departments, which has been one of the aims. So the careers of individuals who may have started life and had a career in the Home Office doing IT projects, for example, can they transfer to deliver IT projects in other settings, HMRC or Department for Work and Pensions? Would they be able to transfer from doing IT projects into other kinds of projects? And those are some of the boundaries that we're trying to explore. I think you get there better by understanding the general ideas that underpin their work. So, hence a dive into theory. We're also very well aware that although we're delivering a program at scale, and at some points we've had 7 cohorts of 30 people, 210 people each, on the program at any one time, it needs to be a very individual experience. So the individual circumstance of that person needs to be taken into account, and we've managed to do that through the support we can provide at an individual, at a small group, as well as a cohort level. Let me dive on to some of the design, and just to keep us going, keep us on time. So this is, if you were a participant, what happens to you? When we've accepted someone onto the program, so there's an admissions process. We have a launch event simply to explain the process and orientate people onto what happens next. Then over the following 12 months, there are 3 one-week residentials here in Oxford. Interspersed between the residentials, we'll have masterclasses that focus on particular subjects. We have action learning groups where participants are in groups of about 4 or 5, and they're supported by an action learning facilitator who tends to be one of the partners from Deloitte, just to really help them get into their individual challenges. Across the process, people are working on a personal development plan. So right at the start, we have a PVP that people need to complete, and then they're supported to work through their personal and professional challenges over the duration of the process. We do a 360-degree survey of their capability at the start. We do a second one at the end, and then we do look and evaluate between their performance between one and the other. We'll support the process with some one-on-one where required. And then what's not shown on here, but what happens through the process, is participants need to write a series of assignments. So in total they do 5 2,000-word essays, 1 after each module. They also do a major project review. They write an assessment after that, and then we ask them to do a final paper describing the key ideas that they've taken from the programme, what they've been able to implement, and the impact it's had on the performance of their work. So that's the thing that they often get a little bit vexed by, because we will mark those assignments against the criteria that are standard for postgraduate master's programs in the university. So they are at a high level where we'd expect them written to quality standards to demonstrate their understandings of concepts and frameworks and the ability to apply them, but also critique those concepts and frameworks and their usefulness and application. So it's quite a rigorous process, and it is one of those where when we meet people at the end, they are very grateful for the opportunity, and all of them will say, you know, it was a testing challenge. The bit that's also missing off the end is you complete the program by having the assessment panel. So I mentioned it before. That is a panel where we make the decision. Do we have the confidence in this person to lead a major project? And the answer is either yes or no. So it is quite an important career moment for them. Success rate is about 80%. The 20% that get turned down, they get further support, because this is a learning program after all, and generally get some intervention to support them for about another year, and then they will get reassessed for a second and final time to see whether they can meet that standard of giving us confidence in their ability to lead projects. So it's quite focused. So the impact. We assess the ability of the participants to acquire the learning based on their performance on the written assessments. So it's a very transparent process. We can see what they've been able to take on board and how they can demonstrate their learning. We look to evaluate their ability to apply these lessons in practice. We judge that in two ways: the things that they report in their final assignment they've been able to implement during their interview, but also we would look to have the impact of their abilities reflected in their second 360 feedback from peers, subordinates, line managers, and also people who work in related organisations, so senior stakeholders that work around them. So we do look for an impact to happen there. We are interested in the impact that happens at an organisational level, so what is happening to the portfolio. And then we're also interested in the direct financial impact of the programme. So two nice things that are happening on a macro level. Scott Kerslake, before he retired from the position of head of civil service, mentioned this. 2 years ago, delivering around 1/3 of the project in time, and now it's up to nearer 2/3. That's in some way had an impact from the Academy, but also that is a function of other activities the Major Projects Authority do. On the financial return on investment, we've graduated 4 of the cohorts so far, and of the people who were on that programme, they will report, and we've investigated some of the direct financial benefits that they've been able to return, and it's coming out at quite a healthy number, so about £350 million. You'll be encouraged to hear that the Academy doesn't cost £350 million. There is a distinct return on investment of that. And then also we will look at participants' evaluation of the programme, so we ask them to put in the feedback sheet to rate how they view the programme. And so far it's quite encouraging in the sort of very good or excellent level. So a few more kind words and then I'll start to wrap up. So Bob came up to visit the programme. Here's him on the right. Me next to him talking to Stephanie and Tony. Based on this and a modestly good lunch that we put on, Bob was kind enough to say these words. So his view was that it's an excellent course and it's done a lot to improve confidence. Confidence is an interesting word because that's also a word that the participants themselves also report a lot. And it's one of those sort of intangible things, I guess a bit like beauty. You sort of know it when you see it, but very difficult to describe. The ability of people to have confidence in the programme and also for others to have confidence in the major project leader and their ability to get a grip on and deliver a project is I think, surprisingly important and connects very strongly with this notion of leadership. People who will show the way, people who will make things happen. And the other comment there is from Danny Alexander. So in his role as Chief Secretary of Treasury, Danny Alexander was the person responsible for signing off the budgets for major projects. And given what he experienced when he came to visit the programme, but also sort of input his time from other people in the Treasury, it was him who's really sort of underpinned the importance of the Academy, which is his second part of that quote. You know, I've decided that all senior leaders will have to take this course before the Treasury gives the green light for any major project. So the future is one where you have to have gone through the Academy in order to be able to lead a major project. So, a sort of final thought. What we think the Academy is doing is really helping those people who are responsible and now accountable for major projects, is to have a much deeper understanding of the anatomy. So the sort of the inner workings of projects and how they operate across their life cycle, from early decision making through to benefits realisation, to support those people to take ownership of the work. And I'm sure Tim Banfield will have mentioned the change to the Osmoverley rules, which often sounds like a slightly dull bureaucratic thing, but in essence, the major project leaders are now given a letter which says you are accountable for the delivery of this project, and they are now accountable before Parliament, and not least the Public Accounts Committee, individually for performance of their project. So what we're helping project leaders do is take ownership, and I believe part of the process has also been that these major project leaders are also pushing that letter back over the table and saying, I'm not signing that until. So the idea is accountability, but only when suitably equipped and given the tools that they need, rather than just taking something on willy-nilly. So it's an interesting change. We also think that by building this wider team, so not just individuals, but groups of major project leaders within departments and across departments, we're able to influence the wider operating environment across government. So helping influence government to be better set up to enable the delivery of major projects. And also to really move up the chain of decision making, to be able to contribute to policy making very early on. So when the political class, the ministers for example, come up with great ideas, to be able to support them to shape those ideas so that they'll be better set up for delivery right at those earliest stages. So let me draw stumps there, and I'll hand back over to Alan, who will be mediating and moderating some of your questions. Alan.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. A fascinating tour de force of what's going on in the MPLA. We've had a number of questions coming in, and what I would like to do is to try and gather some of them together and ask in a generalised manner. And I think the first place I would like to start is with some of the outputs and outcomes that you related to. Fascinating and a great question from an old friend of mine. I won't name names here. What were the success criteria that have been set for the MPLA? And how are you getting on against them? How are they being measured?
Yes. Right. So success criteria. We have... It's a bit of a strap line, and it's one of those things that sort of means nothing and also means everything, which is transforming the delivery of major projects in government is sort of the macro success criteria, which sort of slightly, like it says it all and says nothing. What does that mean? How will we know we've got there? So the sense was that government had rather lost the capability to manage their own projects, and you could start to see this reflected in a lot of probably quite valid media, which was every time the Public Accounts Committee held a hearing, informed by some sterling work by the National Audit Office, would be just giving the media a set of information to give the government a good kicking because another project went sadly wrong. There was the very nice book, Conundrum, by one of the members of the PAC whose name just slipped my memory, and also
Christopher Bacon, I think.
Yes, and also there was another book by, amongst the Survivor crew, The Blunders of Our Government, which started to just bring together some of these stories, and there was, oh God, not another one. So a little bit of the success criteria is to start to reduce the number of things that go sadly wrong, which will inevitably and rightly appear in the media. So that's at the very broadest level. And then we get down to something more specific. So one of the ways of measuring it is the Major Projects Authority assurance reviews. So something that's picked up also by the Treasury. So major project reviews and the red, amber, green assessment of projects. So the Major Projects Authority is tracking that at a macro level. So what we're doing should start to appear and make an impact upon their annual review. So the MPA is doing its annual review, which now is getting published, which shows the assurance reviews collectively. So that should start to move in the right direction, and it has. What we're also aware, though, is that will be influenced by a number of other factors. So I think the RAG reviews have improved enormously in the last 12 months, but equally that could be explained by we're coming towards the end of a government administration and things are starting to now come together and poorly performing projects are being culled and various other things like that. So it's an indication, but not a specific one. Then we move to the performance of individual projects. So what we're hoping to see is that the individual projects by people who've completed the program should start to perform better. But then we're also looking, so the particular success criteria then kind of gets one level down from that, which is one of the things that we're very conscious of was the return on investment number. So we know how much the academy cost. What's the direct benefit in terms of financial return that people can report? So that was one of the numbers that I showed. And another very direct number was the feedback from participants. So they give feedback on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of the elements of what we do, but also overall, how would you rate the academy? So we have a scale against that, which we're also performance measured against.
And given the power of slide 11, I might invite you just to sort of skip back and leave that one up on the screen, because that was a very, very compelling case, as you pointed out at the time, and as you've just acknowledged in that answer. We can't be specific about the metrics. It is a contributor to those benefits, and it's very hard to know just how much of a contribution is directly attributed to the MPLA. Undoubtedly there is some. On just on a point of detail, I think you skipped over, do graduates get any formal either academic or professional qualification out of the course?
Well, that is a bone of contention. When the contract was originally, or when the academy was originally commissioned, one of the criteria that the Cabinet Office put was for accreditation. When we bid, we reported that we couldn't provide that accreditation, and we were awarded the contract recognising that. So the answer is no.
Okay,
so it is a bone of contention amongst the participants, and I completely appreciate that they've done all this work. What they do get, and where I do try to encourage their attention, is the quote from Danny Alexander, which is, basically, if you haven't got this, you can't run a big project. And to some extent, surely that's bigger and better.
Absolutely
but I also
right.
appreciate
Yeah.
that's not strictly true.
Okay. Can I turn to the other end? If that's the outputs, can I turn just a little bit to the inputs? One or two questions over the MPLA being the best kept secret in government. A number of those listening in are from the public sector, in the civil service or in arm's length entities.
Yes.
Where should they be going if they haven't heard of this? How do people get on it? Is it application?
Yeah, the route in is via the permanent secretary. So they will be generally departments are bringing together the list of people. So it's the SRO or project director of projects on the GMPP. So the department should hold a list of that. They should have the names of those two individuals for each one. What we'll probably start to do is target the academy going forward at people whose next career step is into one of those roles. So instead of developing the capabilities of people who are already there, it's developing the capabilities in anticipation of people getting into that position. So generally that's a departmental capability level. If that proves to be a bit of a struggle, it is as straightforward as getting in touch with folks at the MPA.
And the attendants, by and large, most of them are SCS. What sort of proportion are you getting at BAM-B?
So everyone is, so the profile is it tends to be SCS2, some SCS1, some SCS3. So we've got a number of DGs, most people are directors, a few deputy directors.
And for those who are aspiring to attend the MPLA itself, I think I'm right in saying that you do not have, as a part of your contract, the support to those more junior in the aspirational field. What would be your suggestions to those individuals to improve their competence?
The Cabinet Office has just let the contract for a sort of next tier down development program called the Project Leaders Program, which I think is going to be delivered by Cranfield. And that's aimed at the sort of senior team in a major project. So not the PD or SRO, but the others in that senior level. And it's also aimed at the people who are leading projects which are not part of the GMPP. So there is that sort of strange phenomenon where people are leading projects of 100 or 200 million pounds, but they're not GMPP ones, and still are quite substantial. So PLP, Project Leaders Program, is aimed at those. It's a shorter program with bigger cohorts, but we were involved in the development of the curriculum for that. So yeah, take that as you will, but it's great, and certainly kind of aligns nicely with the sort of ideas that we'll have in the academy. So it's a nice next step, and then step to the academy from there.
And do you know when that is coming out and the numbers it'll be available to?
Yes, there's been one pilot. So there's been a pilot cohort, which is, I think, just done its final piece of work. So it already exists. I don't know what the delivery is going to be through Cranfield, but there's an already formed program that they should be able to get going fairly quickly. The idea is that will be between 600 and 800 people a year go through that program, so in cohorts of about 50. So it would be quite a big scale piece of work.
And sorry, when was the first cohort due?
So the first one has just finished, so has been delivered over the past 6 months or so. So I don't know when the first one that will be delivered by Cranfield will be. So I'm not party to that, but it shouldn't be too long, I would encourage it.
And again, do you know what the application route is? Because that presumably doesn't require the permanent secretary's personal approval at that level.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm sure we could probably dig that out and put that somewhere.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. One particular one, a question with a bit of a difference here, which piqued my interest. Are there any particular types of programs, and you went through in, I think it was about slide 9, the various different types you cater for, that you find, yes, that's the one, that you're finding particularly either difficult to influence through your program, or that are particularly appropriate and useful for your program?
Yes. Do you know, strangely, the answer to that is no on both of them, and that's a lovely slippery answer. But it's because we do enjoy the difference. So if there was a program that it seemed much less obvious, they become much more interesting. Really, why is that? You know, sort of draw our attention in. So transformation programs are performed very differently to a sort of classic mega project. They're sort of, there's a different approach. There's the sense that you can deliver a project, a mega project, with a nice sort of waterfall model. I know, let's apply that thinking into transformation programs. To which point you can just sort of hear the sniggers going on in the background for those who are more experienced in transformation programs. So it's things like, well, why not? What is it about transformation programs that makes them much more sort of contingent and flexible? And the reason that's particularly interesting is because it turns out that actually the more conventional looking mega project is also a transformation project, just with a bit more concrete involved. So it may be that if we start our thinking from the thinking associated with transformation and change, we may end up in a better place for some of the other projects, rather than thinking, you know, being constrained by the thinking that informs transport stuff.
Okay.
If that answers.
Yes, thank you. That's extremely helpful. In terms of, and you showed in slide 11 quite a lot of the metrics, have you been able, are you continuing to do any pursuit of audit trail of what's happening to the individuals who've been through the program, where they end up on their subsequent programs, etc.?
Yes. So it's slightly outside of the scope of what we were asked to do by the Cabinet Office, but genuinely a sense of curiosity. We've got a separate budget from within the university to do some impact case studies. There is a bit of self-interest there because universities are now assessed up against impact, and so this work does provide a really good opportunity for us to do stuff and then evaluate the impact. So we're doing a number of impact case studies, which is following the performance of a number of the participants of the program. We can't do them all. We are selective in some of them. But just to see how people have taken some of the ideas. A very fruitful area has been governance. So how the governance of project boards has been influenced by some of the work that we've been doing, and the impact that that's had on bringing in stakeholders, bringing challenge into those boards rather than sort of shuffling it out, and looking at the effect that that has on project performance overall. So we're currently doing, I think it's about 15 of those.
Great. Paul, thank you very much indeed. My clock is just clicking up to 13:30, so as a good project manager I will finish on time. That's been a fascinating presentation, and thank you particularly for the honesty and fullness of your answers. To the audience, I apologise that I have a raft of questions here unasked and unanswered. Some opportunities through the project leaders program now being developed for those who are in the public sector. For those who are in the private sector, this is giving you an indication of just how the project leaders of the major government portfolio are improving and how they will be looking, or you can expect them to be more professional in their behaviours, and they hopefully will be looking for you to be more professional in your behaviours. So on behalf of all those who joined, and I counted at one stage we were up and over 170 people online, thank you, Paul, for your presentation, for your questions and for your contribution. Keep up the good work in the MPLA. As a taxpayer, I'm all in favour of the benefits they can deliver there. And thank you to all of you in the audience. My name is Alan Macklin. I'm Deputy Chair of the APM. I thank you for your participation in this particular event, and please join in the other APM events we run, typically one a day across the year, and they're all accessible online through the APM events portal. And with that, I wish you all a very good day and look forward to seeing, in inverted commas, you again next time. Thank you.